Hey everyone, Chris Johnson with Money Morning. BigBear.ai has been on a wild ride, went from $4 to $10 and back to $6.50, but it's a great buy the dip opportunity ahead of earnings on August 12th. I'm going to walk you through all the charts and explain my long-term outlook on the stock. Give me 5 or 10 minutes. You're going to be a better investor for it. Let's jump into it. All right, as I always say, let's jump right into it. BigBear.ai has become one of the more exciting speculation stocks out there. People thinking about it as a Mini-Palantir, if you will. And when you look at the two, they do have a lot of comparisons. Both AI service companies, both are among those that are getting the big defense contracts right now. They're not as big, obviously, with BBAI, but nonetheless, they're going down the same path, and that is where you're seeing a lot of growth in these AI service/software companies. So this is an early stage innovation and an early stage discovery stock. It's going to trade like that, but it's got an opportunity right now when I look at it and how it's changed from February. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We've seen this rally that's been more than doubled the stock here in the last couple of weeks. We ran from $4 above $8, and now the stock is pulled back 23-25% or so. Depends on if you're looking at those highs again. A lot of people starting to think it's going to be another one of these February situations. That does not look to be the case. There is more support right now for the stock in the options market and the technicals here. And in February, we saw the company go out and start to raise capital, selling securities into the market. And we saw an earnings report where they actually disappointed and lowered their guidance, their fiscal year 2025 guidance. We saw in May, the company came out and actually reaffirmed that guidance. And that is why we saw that 50-day moving average, the green line, start to turn bullish. That tells us that momentum on BBAI is now favoring the bulls. Then we got that breakthrough $4.50, and it turned into something where we were breaking above where the options market had started to draw lines. So we get hedging that starts to drive the price higher, as well as just the excitement. Now you can see the volume here. We started to get an increase in volume on the stock right above that breakout above 450. It told you a couple of things. First of all, institutional investors are getting a little more active. They like to trade stocks that are above $5, and they saw that coming. And we also saw the crowd getting involved. Headlines in terms of what was going on with the company. Back in June 24th, we saw the stock actually break above that $5 level. That's where the institutions really start to get involved, and we saw volume start to go through the roof. So people are chasing the stock higher at that point. It was a breakout rally on a stock that has been speculative. So we see that push all the way back up to that $8.50 or so on the intraday highs. Now, what happened is textbook. This pullback has been textbook. And here's what I mean. The chart gets a little more complicated, but I'll explain it all. We had what I call a crescendo top in the stock. We saw that volume surge, and that's what I'm pointing out here with that red circle. And then we saw round number resistance kick in at $8. Round numbers tend to play heavily on stocks under $10. That's just a key thing that every investor should know. And then we saw the RSI. You hear about stocks being overbought. This is the simple indicator that tells you if a stock is overbought or oversold, and it hit an oversold reading. So those three things cause the market to kind of expand itself. Think about stretching a rubber band. It stretched too far. Now it has to snap back. It's what we call a healthy correction. When you look at the chart that we've got now, we've seen that healthy correction pull a BBAI back below that $7, a round number, and it's hovering around $6.50. $6.50 to $6 is the price that I'm looking at right now for the buy the dip opportunity, and there's a rationale behind why the stock will go higher here. But when you look at it, it comes down to the options market. I just did a video on Palantir a couple of days ago and talked about the exact same thing. You don't fight City Hall. In this case, City Hall is the options market, derivatives out there. So when we look at the options that are expiring on July 18th, this is July expiration. Look at the calls right now at that $6 level. Look at the $10. These are options traders that are out there speculating that the stock is going to go up to $10. It's not going to happen before that expiration. These are going to expire worthless. But when we start looking here where the calls outweigh the puts, it starts at $7.50 and then $8 and then $8.50. That is where we should have expected to see resistance on BBAI. Now, when we look at the reverse, notice when you start to get to that 650 level, you actually have a call that is outweighing, or I'm sorry, a put that is outweighing the call open interest. That starts to tell us that right in this zone, $6 to $7, we're going to see support starting to kick in. And remember that $6 is also round number psychological support. This is what the August expiration open interest looks like. So these are the options that will expire after the company's earnings on August 12th. And you can see that it's a little more balanced here. We've got puts that are trading up around that $7 range and then above $8 where you don't see a lot of put activity. This is going to be, I'll just tell you, $8 is going to be resistance for a little while. But I believe that the stock after this buy the dip is going to actually trade up to that $8 ahead of earnings. This is a convenient coincidence of seasonality mixing up with the charts and the derivatives market. Here's what I mean. When we look at the stock and where it's trading right now at that $6.50 range, it aligns with the open interest that starts to build up on the put side of the market. And it's also a spot where we've seen what I call muscle memory, a little bit of a hitch in the chart back in February. But most importantly, that's where your puts start to build up. We also have support from that 20-day moving average that's coming up to play and the round number. That tells me that $6.50 to $6 is the range where I want to start being a buyer of BBAI ahead of its next rally. What's going to be the driver of that rally? Why would I think that it's going to go from $6 or $6.50 up to $8? It is, as I said, as easy as the calendar and earnings, of course. Now, let me go off the slide here for a second and just kind of explain things. Seasonality, from a seasonality perspective, the market, we're entering earnings, right? Next week, we start to see the banks roll in. And then in a couple weeks, we'll get the Magnificent Seven stocks, or most of them. NVIDIA is the late one to the party there. But we'll get most of those companies announcing earnings here towards the end and the beginning of August. That gives the market a boost, a catalyst. Unless things really come in off the rails, you're going to see stocks rally through the end of August. Now, BigBear.ai announces their earnings a day after Palantir on August 12th. This aligns with the buy the rumor activity that we've seen the last earnings season. And what I mean by that is this chart. This is the 2 weeks before earnings on BigBear.ai. So this is the trend that we see. And you'll notice that it's really kind of wonky, but there are some outliers there. 82%. Last quarter, and this is the one that makes more of a difference to me because there's, let's call it some recency to it, a recency bias, but that 32% or so, that's what we saw going into the last quarter's earnings. Investors are thinking about that, and if they start to see that bounce around that $6.60 or $6.50 line, we're going to see them get emotional. It's sentiment driving the trade. People are going to start to get that fear of missing out like they did last quarter when the stock rallied 32%. So conveniently, this lines up with the seasonality of the stock. We get the pre-earnings rally, the FOMO rally into earnings, and those are again on August 12th. But look how nicely this matches up with the stock chart right now. That $6.50 range right in here, if we took it back up, we're 25% to that $8, which is where I see the stock going ahead of earnings. We may stretch out and go back up to that $8.50, which would give you 35%. If we do drop down to that $6 range, you go back up to the $8, and you're right around that 33% as well. So remember, I said recency bias. Investors might look back, and they will look back at what happened last quarter and say, well, the stock went up 25, 35% ahead of earnings. Let's buy the rumor here because they already lowered back in February when they dropped the guidance for fiscal year 2025. They confirmed that last quarter, and investors are going to see, especially because of the contracts that they've been signing, expect to see some relatively good news. Now, a beat and raise, it's going to take the stock from $8 to $10 very quickly. But let's look very fast at what the stock has done on average after earnings. Here's your performance. And remember, this is an early stage company, so we don't have 5 years worth of earnings like we do on Palantir and even more, obviously, on NVIDIA and others. But let's look at what happens after earnings. So on average. And remember, we've only got a couple of years worth of data on BBAI in terms of the earnings results. It's an early stage innovation company, very speculative because of that reason. And I'm a little cautious as we go into earnings. I might want to hedge those positions or look for another buy the dip opportunity because of this chart. Look at this. When we look at the win rate here, first of all, look at the win rate, and that is 2-week performance after BBAI's earnings results, all the earnings that they've reported. The stock is only up 36% of the time. On average, when it is up, it's up 12%. When it's down 22%. Right in the middle is your average of a loss of 10.6%. So whether they beat or miss, and they've only, in some cases, kind of made analysts feel like maybe they were getting ground or gaining ground, that's going to be a situation where we're likely to see a pullback, especially as the stock is trading under $10. We're likely to see some profit taking on that buy the rumor rally. But I think that opens up another buy the dip opportunity after earnings. So remember, the company has a negative outlook when you look at the post-earnings performance. The FOMO rally or the buy the rumor rally should be strong in this case. So how do I trade this? What's the bottom line on this? Well, I look at it from a situation where this is a short-term trade opportunity with volatility to the upside for a 20 to 30, let's call it even 35% win. Pull back to 6 or 650, which is what we're in the midst of right now, and it is considered a healthy correction. This is in a nice little bull market trend when we look at that 50-day moving average. That's going to happen over the next 1 to 2 weeks. We're trading right at 650 right now, so I start to look to add positions if I'm a short-term trader. And then you've got a long or a short-term target rather of $8 as we head into earnings. Remember, that goes with the seasonality and what we saw last quarter on Palantir. Now, they pulled back from the overbought situation. We saw that crescendo. First line of support was at $7, but it stretched in terms of that relative strength. Second round is at $6 to $6.50. And if it were to hit $5, that is where I back up the truck ahead of earnings. And that would have to happen in the next week or so. I back it up and I say, okay, I'm going to ride this rally into earnings season up to a $7 to $8 level at that point, and that is going to be an impressive move, and it would be fast and aggressive. That is that buy the rumor. So at $8, if we're sitting there at earnings, I expect to start thinking, all right, I might want to hedge this protected or even take some of that position off. But the pullback that we get, if we get that 10% pullback, which is the average return 2 weeks after earnings on BBAI, I start to look at that as a buying opportunity. We're above the 20-month moving average on BBAI. We're above that 50-day moving average. The traders have been getting involved. Volume continues to increase. The options market has been very active. Remember, looking at that $8 and $10 target here, and that is where I see the stock going over the next 6 to 12 months. $10 to $12.50. I think we get another follow through, not necessarily that February situation that we saw. As long as a company doesn't give us a disappointment or a lowering of their outlook, which is what they did earlier this year, and that's what helped in that February decline, you see a follow-up through that goes up through that $8 and up towards that $10 to $12.50 range, and that's a wide range, but remember, this is a highly traded stock, so the volatility will make those peaks go from not only $10, but the next stage would be $12.50. We've seen it with Archer and Joby and a few of these other companies that have emerged from that $10, sub $10 price range. Company lowers expectations 2 months ago or 2 quarters ago and is now performing as they're signing those contracts, the defense contracts. So expect to see them firm up that fiscal year 25 looking, and that's going to help to improve the fundamental backdrop. I look for revenue also to accelerate now. Those contracts starting to come through in terms of revenue. Their price to sales is around $10, $10 times right now when you compare that to Palantir, which I still say is not overvalued because investors are looking at the same way that they look at BBAI. Palantir's at 110. So there is a big difference in the value, the valuations in terms of sales, with a 10 on the price to sales ratio for BBAI. This is still going to be a very speculative and volatile play. It's a version of Palantir that the market's getting excited with. Expect it to trade with that ebb and flow and it to be much faster. Long-term price, I see a $10 to $12.50, and I'm going to be a long-term holder. And the way I'm a holder, I do have the stock, but I also trade the 2027 leaps on this on the call side. For that reason, it's a way that I can put a little less down on the position, and I go deep in the money on those options, and we're talking $2 and $3 strikes, and I hold them for the long term. Spreads are going to be wide. Those options traders out there that are looking at that, they're going to be wide. I just use an option pricing model to make sure that I'm paying a fair price for the volatility to get into those. But that's one way that I not only leverage, but also allow myself to put a little less of the portfolio, and I can exercise those anytime and take the stock and let that sit in my portfolio as well. Doesn't pay a dividend, so I'm not missing out. So there you have it. A great short-term buy-the-dip opportunity that begins with a $6 to $6.50, which is right around where we're trading right now, price tag, with an expectation that the stock runs up to $8 ahead of earnings. May want to back off on that, or at least expect the volatility that could bring it down another $1 or so after that earnings announcement. But any positive news from BBAI is going to drive this stock straight up to that $10 range. And I don't think it looks back from there. Then you're talking that $12.50, which is a monster move for a stock at $6.50 right now, obviously more than doubling from this point. Make sure that you sign up for our 5-stock watch list that we send out every week. You get a growth, a technology, a dividend, and a stock below $10 that we're interested in, as well as a short pick for the week. It's great information to get your week started. And like and follow us below. Put some messages down there in the chat as well. Got some great ones on Palantir that I plan on going through and addressing. As always, I'm Chris Johnson from Monday Morning, wishing you the best trading success. Have a great day.